And covers federal and state local spending issues. Sandra is also the executive director of Americans for Tax Reform. Their newest project, the Center for Fiscal Accountability. The Center for Fiscal Accountability seeks to promote fiscal transparency, accountability, and spending restraint at all levels of government, which is kind of what we're doing here. Annually, the center issues the Cost of Government Day, which this year for us was about July 1st. That's when you actually started working for yourself and you weren't working for taxes or regulation and all that. Sandra is also a contributing editor for Budget and Tax News, a monthly publication of the Heartland Institute, and an adjunct scholar at James Madison University. Sandra is a graduate of the University of Bonn in Germany, where she got a master's degree in political science, and I'm going to help get this set up with your website, right? So please welcome Sandra.
Move this down a little bit. First of all, thank you, Carl. Thank you to the Montana Policy Institute and all of you for coming out today to this great opportunity to exchange ideas, to interact, and to see what reforms we can implement in Montana and we should be implementing in Montana. And Barry and Jonathan talked a lot about the three reforms that should be implemented very soon. I would want to add a fourth one to that, which I think is also going to be a useful tool to help us implement the other ones, because what we would like to see happening is the implementation of a spending transparency piece of legislation here in Montana, because spending transparency, having all the information out there on what government actually spends, is going to provide you with the opportunity and it's going to help you make your case for just saying no, as Mike Tanner said, should be done more often. Because if people see where government is spending their tax dollars, they're going to realize that not everything is perfect there. We think that transparency is actually the next big thing, and has the power of transforming American politics and policy from the bottom up. Now, how did we arrive at this conclusion? Transparency or accountability through transparency is actually not a new concept. And in fact, it was one of the founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson, who about 200 years ago, a good 200 years ago, said, "We might hope to see the finances of the Union as clear and intelligible as a merchant's books, so that every member of Congress and every man of any mind in the Union should be able to comprehend them, to investigate abuses, and consequently to control them." Now, the Founding Fathers obviously lived in a time in which information didn't travel quite as fast, but they certainly understood that accountability is one of the cornerstones of the republic in which we live, and that transparency ultimately is a prerequisite to getting to this accountability. After all, isn't the consent of the governed so much more meaningful if it's informed consent? A good 200 years later, and Jonathan talked about Washington not usually the place you look for in terms of guidance. This is actually the exception to the rule, because this is something where good things actually came out of Washington, D.C. In 2006, two senators, Dr. Tom Coburn of Oklahoma and Senator and now President-elect Barack Obama joined forces to co-sponsor what became landmark legislation to promote transparency in government spending, and that was the Federal Funding Accountability and Transparency Act of 2006. That law mandated the creation of a searchable database for all federal grants and contracts, and ultimately led to the creation of a website that I would encourage you to take a look at, usaspending.gov. The unanimous passage of this piece of legislation was probably aided by the fact that you had lawmakers coming from fundamentally different backgrounds and ideologies here getting the ball rolling on this. Obviously, Dr. Tom Coburn being one of the most conservative members, and then Barack Obama being one of the most, if not the most liberal senators. So having those on board certainly helped, although it is not without irony that there actually was a secret hold on a sunshine piece of legislation. Before we got to unanimous passage, we had to remove 2 subsequent holds on this piece of legislation, and those were secret holds. Since the passage of this piece of legislation, ATR, Americans for Tax Reform, and more recently the Center for Fiscal Accountability has been working with lawmakers and activists around the country and groups like ALEC and the Montana Policy Institute on basically emulating this federal concept and ideally push it even further, both at the state and at the local level. And what we're looking to do is create searchable websites for government expenditures, including but not limited to grants and contracts. We want to see all the expenditures, and we're not talking about posting the budget. The budget, as my boss has said before, is the document that tells you, in which politicians tell you how much they would like to spend. We want to see the actual expenditures. We want to see line by line expenditures. Who gets the funding? Where is your money actually going? And we have had some great successes in the last 2 years. 12 states since 2007 have passed spending transparency legislation. So if you're embarking on this effort here in Montana, you're not alone. There are models out there. Those 12 states are, and the first 5 passed it in 2007, Kansas, Texas, Oklahoma, Minnesota, and Hawaii. And then this year we had 7 states pass legislation: Washington State, Utah, Louisiana, Mississippi, Maryland, Georgia, and Arizona. As you can see, those are very diverse states, very different partisan compositions too. And we might even get 1 or 2 more this year to embrace this, as Illinois and Ohio are looking to hold hearings on spending transparency legislation in the Senate this week. In addition, we had 7 governors take their own executive steps to create searchable websites for government expenditures, and those were Governor Blunt of Missouri, Governor Sanford of South Carolina, who we've heard a lot about earlier, who has been a leader on many of the reforms that we're seeking, Governor Palin of Alaska, Governor Gibbons of Nevada, Governor Jindal of Louisiana, Governor Rounce of South Dakota, and that was an interesting story because he created a searchable website for government expenditures after having vetoed a piece of legislation to this effect earlier this session. And then Governor Beshear of Kentucky. And we probably should also add, or we should add, although he didn't issue an executive order to this effect, but Governor Rick Perry of Texas has been a great leader on this issue, working with the legislature and the state comptroller in getting the ball rolling on this and moving this forward. And Governor Christ of Florida has also taken impressive steps towards more transparency in government, not so much transparency in government spending yet, but we're hopeful that we're going to see an executive order coming from Florida before the legislature convenes in March. So we're looking forward to that. 7 of those websites that were created are already live, and you can get to those websites actually through our website, fiscalaccountability.org, and I'm going to be talking a little bit more about that in just a little bit. But in addition to all those efforts that I just referenced, we've also seen other state constitutional officers, other statewide office holders, take their own steps to increase transparency in government spending, and those take different forms. Some just went ahead, and that's remarkable too, and posted their own office's expenditures online in a searchable form, thereby kicking off, jump-starting the conversation in their states. And others have created more comprehensive portals in their own states. And the state think tanks, groups like Carl's Montana Policy Institute, are getting in on the action too. Last time I checked, the number of free